Now, an in-depth look at the news and information shaping our community. This is Moose Talks with your host, Doug Craig, on Moose FM.
Welcome to the show. Well, it's back to school after the long weekend, so a little later on we're going to be chatting with Constable Chad Neustaeter with the Fort St. John RCMP all about some back-to-school safety tips, for drivers and students alike. But first, as we all know, it's been a challenging few years for everyone, including students, teachers, and school district staff, as they've been juggling shifting pandemic restrictions while still delivering educational programs for students. So to talk about that and how the upcoming school year is looking for students and parents, we're joined now by School District 60 Superintendent Stephen Petrucci. Stephen, welcome back to Moose Talks.
Hey, good morning. How you doing, Doug?
I'm doing very well. It's nice to see you in person.
Thanks. You too.
After interviewing you so many times over Zoom over the last 2 years. I want to start with a look back, of course. It's been a challenging few years, as we said. I wonder if you could comment first on what you make of how students, teachers, staff, and parents have overcome these challenges in the school in still getting their education in spite of the fact that we're in the classroom, that we're out. Some of us are in, some are out, and sort of that making that all work somehow.
Yeah, I mean, the last 3 years have been very challenging that way, Dub. Everyone has had to pull together, and they've done that extremely well. BC was in a relatively good place compared to most other jurisdictions in the sense that other than that 3-month stint in the spring of 2019, we've kept all the kids in school full time. Obviously, the attendance has varied across those times, but I think just the fact that the staff pulled together, that we were able to avoid some of that more serious confrontation that we've seen in other districts and down south, I think is a real testament to the patience that everyone has had and has had to have, whether students, parents, teachers, admin. The protocols, required a lot of patience and time. And so we came through it, I think, okay.
I wonder what, this sort of last few years means going forward for policies and handling, continued COVID. It's not quite over yet, but we're through, it seems, the worst of it anyway. But other pandemics and other emergency crises that, pop up from the standpoint of delivering education, especially in the School District 60.
Yeah. I think I would reflect kind of the mood now in the sense that, we're really looking forward to not having to deal with this and to not have to discuss it too much, and looking ahead to more of a regular start to the year. I'm certain there will be other challenges down the road. Right now, for example, these pandemic plans have moved into what we call communicable disease plans, and we're in the endemic stage now. And again, BC's kind of led the way in that regard, and students are not going to be facing any of those restrictions this fall. So I think it's looking promising. Of course, there will be other challenges, but I think over the past few years, as I say, we really learned how to collaborate together, to reach out to people. I think, teachers, for example, when the students were not there, got very creative and had the technology platforms and know-how to still connect with students and families, and that was super important.
Do you think this has changed, or has it changed sort of how maybe we approach delivering education, knowing that we know now that students can learn at home if they have to, whether it's because there's something happening or if they're sick, or maybe even if they prefer it for whatever reason? Has that changed, would you say?
Well, I think it's definitely a deeper understanding, and even some of the tools we now have developed and evolved. I would also say, however, that it confirmed just how important it is to be attending school in person, and all of those sort of formal but also informal interactions that occur, and students and their friendships being together. And even with the teachers and the other adults in the buildings, those interactions and the learning that happens can't really be replicated. But that communication at home, the sort of online options that we now have, both with our regular schools as well as our Key Learning Center, are all being developed more and more as we move on.
I wonder, too, if, and I don't know if you could speak to this at all, because we haven't started the school yet, but if we've seen a change in the children who have now been through a few years of this as they grow up,
right?
If they're in elementary school or junior high, and how, what maybe, if at all, there's a plan for how we're going to deal with that with kids who've lived in a world where they weren't allowed to see their friends and members of their family and be at school in person for, extended periods of time due to the pandemic.
Yeah. Well, I think, since the spring, of course, those restrictions were lifted. And so we've had a few months of school where they've been able to mingle and to, continue those friendships as per normal and to have more of a normal school experience. So we just anticipate that continuing. Kids are very adaptive and they adapt quickly. But you're absolutely right. There were some students who, new kindergarten students 2 years ago, didn't know a school experience other than during a pandemic, or, seeing the adults with masks on, and now seeing them without for the first time. So, but we're really confident the students adapt quickly, and quite frankly, everyone was just ready to move on. And that's what we're doing, and we're really excited about the new school year.
All right. Well, let's get on to that. I think in an interview earlier this week with energeticcity.ca, you called it a more normal school year,
right,
which is lovely to hear.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about, what normal is looking like this year? What normal things can we expect, and maybe what isn't as normal as it perhaps was before? Yeah,
that's a good question. I think mostly people are looking forward to just that full engagement at school, whether it's in the classes, of course, but also the extracurriculars. We started to see that come back.
Yeah.
Parents, really had a lot of patience and are looking forward to re-engaging with the schools, their teachers, the administrators, and the school itself. And so I think that more normal means that, being welcome, having meetings, having events happen at the school, having parent volunteers come back. And so we're all looking forward to that. And so that's definitely one aspect that is going to look great. In terms of any ongoing challenges, I think, as I say, we've moved towards this communicable disease plan. We're going to be promoting really good hand hygiene, personal hygiene, as well as the vaccinations, and that's continuing its course.
Mm-hmm. Has there been anything that's still kind of on a pause that maybe would have been part of a normal school year that you can think of? Or, you mentioned extracurricular activities. Is everything coming back that would have been kind of there before that you know of?
Yeah, absolutely, they're all coming back. If there's something that we continue to face as you may and other industries, and that is, staff shortages. Mm-hmm. And it's not unique to education. It's certainly not unique to our district. And in fact, some of our northern colleagues are really struggling right now in other districts. But we also, our school principals and vice principals have really had to scramble over the last few years, but covering classes, but especially in the last few months, just filling some of those gaps that we still have. Mm-hmm. It's coming together quite well now. We've been able to fill most of those positions, but I think the ongoing shortages when it comes to our casual lists for teachers, support staff, and bus drivers. We could use a few more bus drivers. So I think that will be one hangover that probably continues for quite a while in terms of finding qualified people.
Mm-hmm. What has changed for good that came perhaps out of the pandemic? You've mentioned the communicable disease plan.
Yeah.
I assume you had some sort of version of that before, and I think in our various interviews we've touched on that. So I could see that as one of the things. But is there anything else that's sort of changed because of the pandemic that now is we're going to keep this policy going forward? We have to keep this policy going forward.
Yeah, it's a good question. To be fair, most of the pandemic experience we're happy to forget, and yet some things will be positive. As I mentioned, we really had to reach out to parents in different ways, and also to our First Nations partners and communities. And in that regard, I think we've laid a good foundation. We've really had to establish new communication protocols and regular communications with our First Nations and Indigenous partners. So that, I think, was a positive element that will continue in terms of those regular and ongoing meetings and work that we're doing together. For example, we have a curriculum committee that we formed along with the Doig River First Nations, and we're going to continue that work together. And a lot of that was, precipitated by some of the challenges of the pandemic, where we really had to reach out in different ways and make sure we had that consultation and to make sure we were hearing from people who were not necessarily in our schools at that time.
All right, well, final question for you, Stephen Petrucci, the superintendent of School District 60, joining us on Moose Talks. What do you think you're looking forward to most about this year? Is it the normalcy?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited about just seeing that full energetic experience in the schools. We started to see it in the spring. We're going to see more of it now. I'm really looking forward to getting out to the schools myself and to seeing other members of the community there, maybe like yourself, Dub, if you want to do a couple of visits, or having our parents there. Mm-hmm. And I think just the excitement of beginning a year that looks more normal, and I'm sure the kids are very excited about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much for coming to talk to us today. I know you're busy getting ready. We appreciate your time.
No, most welcome. No problem.
Absolutely. That's Stephen Petrucci, the the superintendent of School District 60. We'll be right back to talk to Chad Neustaeter, constable with the RCMP here in town, right after this on Moose Talks.
Watch this show live on Facebook or download the podcast at energeticcity.ca.
Welcome back to the show. I'm Dub Craig. Now to continue the talk about back to school, we thought we'd talk a bit about safety. Of course, those school zones are back in effect, and you're going to have to be sure you slow down. The RCMP aren't messing around. So to talk about that and all other things back to school safety, we're joined now by Constable Chad Neustaeter with the RCMP here in town. Constable, welcome to Moose Talks.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for taking some time to chat with us today. So I think the big one we think about when we talk about back to school safety is the school zone on the roads, right? There's suddenly going to be hundreds of kids wandering around, smaller kids who maybe don't always understand the rules of the road. You can't be zipping through there while you're driving. It's a very unsafe situation for everybody, eh?
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons I think it is the priority is school zones and the speed. As soon as you can slow people down, they've got more time to react, time to see what's going on, and they can respond accordingly to what's happening. So speed zones, the priority for sure.
Yeah. Is this, I don't want to rag on drivers in Fort St. John, but is this like an ongoing problem you kind of see at the start of school years all the time, where it's just like, well, we catch a bunch of people doing it and we got to lay down the law?
So there is a lot that happens at the beginning of the school years for sure, and anytime after any sort of break.
Yeah.
That being said, as the RCMP here in town, we get complaints throughout the year.
Yeah.
There's always those people that feel like they're in too much of a hurry. Things are going on where they need to do something, and they neglect or miss the speed zones, and that's when we get called for sure.
Gotcha. So we know drivers have to slow down to 30 kilometers an hour going through a speed zone, kind of during the school day. I think it's 8 to 5 usually. It
Correct.
says on the signs, right? But we want to talk about prevention for pedestrians too, because of course you have a right to cross the street safely and all that, but a car isn't going to care about that if it hits you, right? So if you're a pedestrian, if you're a parent of young children, what are we looking at in terms of making sure that everybody's as safe as possible in the zone when they're in it?
One of the things that I thought about was, because we're talking about this now before the long weekend, before school starts, if you've got kids that are transitioning to a different school maybe, and this is new for them, you've got children that are starting, if you could even just orient them to where the school is, where the crosswalks are, get them used to that. Plan a route back and forth. That way, when they're going to school or coming back, you know where they are. If they can't be on the route, something changes too, let the parent know. Like as a child, let the parent know, if you're going to a friend's, if you're taking a different route home, if you're going to be late. Then parents aren't worrying about them either. I think that's some of the big things too. But for parents to also talk to their kids about safety. One of the biggest things is if children have to cross a road, making sure that they look both ways, make sure that they make eye contact with a driver. Oftentimes they'll say, I went to look, there was a vehicle, and they went across and they didn't have eye contact with the driver. They didn't know what the driver was doing. So having eye contact with the driver, ensuring that it's going to be safe for them to cross that road. So for parents to be able to talk to them about that too is very important. Plan drop-offs too. For a parent that's maybe dropping off their children, trying to ensure that they're on the same side of the road, even as the school. You minimize a crossing with a child, maybe multiple children, making it safer for them and for all the drivers as well too.
Okay. Another thing I want to talk about quickly is, jaywalking. Again, you hear about this every once in a while. Someone will go in a Facebook group and, complain about seeing it happen, especially around the high school. Why is that so dangerous to do so? Because, you get fined for it if you get caught doing it. Why shouldn't you be jaywalking if you happen to be someone who, is at the high school and doing so?
Yeah. One of the things it does is it draws attention. If you've got a driver that's watching you as you're jaywalking, they're maybe not looking for somebody else that, even maybe it's just opening a car door.
Yeah.
Right? They're paying attention to you, trying to make sure that you're safe, they're safe, and you've got all of their attention, and they can't see the other things that maybe are less subtle or happening around them that may or may not turn into something, but you're the one that's doing it. And you're slowing down traffic. Other traffic people might not be realizing that you're there. Whereas if you're at a crosswalk, they expect a pedestrian could be there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. In terms of just other back to school safety tips that maybe aren't necessarily traffic related, I wonder if you've got some that you could share again for parents, students, whatever they happen to be.
One that I do still want to focus on is when it comes to school buses. Mm-hmm. A big one. We have a lot of rural population where a lot of people are bused in to town. And so anytime you see a school bus with an arm extended, whether it's a stop sign that's extended or a safety arm, when those are extended, people must stop. If you see red flashing lights, you must stop. So often people don't know which direction a disembarking child is going, right? And they might walk around the front of a bus and cross the road. And if someone's just ripping past, they can't see where that child is or when they're going to step out. So stop for buses. And just be patient with them too. Sometimes they may drive a little bit slower. They're bigger, they're larger. The safety of all those children is at risk as well too. So that's one of the big things. When it comes to general safety, a lot of times parents are working. And it's even the after school plan. What's happening with your child? Where are they going? Who are they spending time with? If they're going to be home alone, are they prepared to be home alone? Do they know emergency contact numbers if something was to happen? Do they have arrangements to go to a friend's place where they can be safe as well too, where you're going to pick them up? Are schedules planned? All of those things go into the whole new routine of September and the school year.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, Constable, we really appreciate you taking some time to chat with us here today. Is there anything else you want to say before we let it go?
I just think, back to school is a very exciting time for parents and kids. And just following rules of the road, being patient, slowing down can make it safer for everybody. Absolutely. And I think that's what's important. And that's what we as the RCMP want. We want it to be safe for everybody involved on the roads.
Alrighty. Well, thank you, Constable, for being here today. We appreciate it.
My pleasure, Dub. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. That's Constable Chad Neustaeter with the RCMP here in Fort St. John. We'll be right back to wrap things up on Moose Talks right after this.
Our community first. This is Moose Talks with Dub Craig on Moose FM.
Our thanks to our guests, Stephen Petrucci and Constable Chad Neustaeter, for joining us today. Make sure you check out the Energetic City podcast page for this episode and others of Moose Talks, as well as episodes of Before the Peace and Voices of the Peace, two excellent podcasts produced right here by folks at Energetic City. For your listening pleasure this long weekend, why not spend some time checking out energeticcity.ca/podcasts. Well, that's the show for today. Trey Lopushinsky is the producer of Moose Talks. I'm Dub Craig. Be well.
Join us next Friday at 10 a.m. for another episode of Moose Talks, a weekly talk show about Fort St. John and the North Peace.